not every moment needs to be filled with someone's voice. And oftentimes, quiet is the best communication. That entire century is collapsed into a very small number of events and people. The majority of what happened there is lost to history. The same is going to be true with our time and place.
How does your mind work? Do you see stuff? Do you feel stuff? How old are you right now by calendar, and how old are you by your biological age?
My brain is 34. My heart is on scales that break our imaginations, that basically strip us of the ability to make any actual predictions other than it's beyond our ability to model out. What is the actual occupiable space of consciousness?
Welcome to Brain VR podcast. I'm sitting here with the myth, the legend, Bryan Johnson himself. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
I've heard many of your talks. I've heard you yesterday, and what I found the most interesting is you have such a good energy, such a good vibe in person, even much better than just perceiving you from the video and for the cyberspace from the internet, right? So I would like to ask for distinction between the public kind of persona and your personal life. How do you approach that, and how do you want to kind of shift the zeitgeist maybe with that?
Yeah. How do I feel in person?
Yeah.
No, so I'm asking you.
Oh, how do you feel? Oh, yeah. Well, you feel like a good dude, really cool person to be around. Like it feels good to talk to you. And I think the public perception maybe kind of shifted a little bit because it doesn't feel that way from the video, right? So that's has been really interesting, like something I've really noticed a lot. So that's I want to ask you kind of like, do you kind of design the public perception as well a little bit because you said something about that yesterday, to shift the zeitgeist, to help shift the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
So is that some kind of like design as well, or?
Yeah. I really am just myself. It's not an act. I don't plan things out. I genuinely try to be myself in all circumstances. And to some extent, I try to be self-aware of the audience I'm speaking to, so I can anticipate. But no, I mean, I'm the same person in private that you see in public. And most of what I do is just play.
I've heard you talk about your time, your day, and you are with your son, and you don't have a space for kind of a just like small talk. So can you expand on that a little bit more? What do you think about, and why there's no space for the small talk?
Yeah. My 17-year-old son moved in with me, and we both wanted to create a beautiful home environment. And it was a nice starting point because we both have a proclivity where we don't really like to talk a lot. When we do speak, we like it to be meaningful and to actually exchange information. And so, for example, interactions of, good morning, how's the weather, anything to fill the void, we both found it to be a distraction from how we wanted to spend our mental energy. Because when even the smallest of interactions of good morning, how's the weather, you need to generate energy to respond and be kind and present and considerate. You don't want to be dismissive. You're then going to offend the person. So anytime you step into a social interaction, there's a huge energy cost. And both he and I really enjoy being in deep thought about a variety of things. I generally, when I don't have anything to think about, I'm typically thinking about the 25th century. I'm trying to escape my moment in time and be in that place. And so jumping from there to good morning is such a shock. It just takes me out of the space I love being in. And so a lot of people heard this and they said, oh, he's such a bad guy. He's like, he's so insensitive, or he's so cold. And I would make the observation, it's actually really great relationship hygiene that not every moment needs to be filled with someone's voice. And oftentimes, quiet is the best communication. And so my son and I, we have the same space and we communicate in silence. And it's a beautiful environment. And I think I know from my personal experience, when I'm in a group setting and I'm quiet, it makes everyone else feel uncomfortable. That unless there's someone speaking, it's like it goes from like 500 milliseconds is uncomfortable. When you get to a second, everyone's in panic because no one's spoken. That's how eager we are to fill the void. And sometimes better cohesion happens with silence.
I like that a lot. I think I had to learn that during interviewing for 6 years now. It's very useful to be able to leave silence. Just maybe have a question to leave the silence. Obviously, it oscillates. How am I able to do that? But then also in my own life and what I've been experiencing is we do meaningful retreats in Czech Republic, and there is this kind of a circle practice where you just say what's alive in you right now, and you start to notice the machinery of the mind. It immediately goes from here to a story a week ago to something in the future, and it does it all the time. And so it's like, no, bring it back. And then if you bring it back, there might be silence, and there might be I feel weird in the silence, and that's it. And there's nothing else. And then I feel relaxed now in this, So I think this actually is something that more people should cultivate, right? To be comfortable in the silence. And as you said, there's so much communication between us right now, other than the words. Like the words are just the pinnacle, right? But there's so much going on, and I love that. I love to feel the person. That's what I said. That's I felt it was different than rather experiencing you from the cyberspace. Anyway. I love the 25th century thought experiment. Can you expand on that? How does that fit in your life right now and what you are trying to achieve?
My primary education is from reading biographies. And when I read about people in a century, let's say the 15th or the 16th or 17th century, that entire century is collapsed into a very small number of events and people. The majority of what happened there is lost to history. The same is going to be true with our time and place. Now, there are people who are not motivated by that kind of timescale. Some people want to do what's best for today, and that's adequate. And there's no judgment for my part. My understanding of the world is I look back and I marvel at those people because I benefit from the things they did, whether it be in the governance we have in the world, or whether it be an antibiotic, or whether it be medical innovation or computers. They were somehow able to see something in their time and place that no one else could. And oftentimes when that happened, they went the predictable process of being ridiculed, hated, told they were crazy. It's as predictable as anything in this world. But I respect them and I appreciate them. And I want to pay it forward to future generations. So when the 25th century looks back, I want to have this same connection with them where they would express gratitude that in the early 21st century, I was able to see and do something that was unique, that benefited intelligence as it spread throughout the galaxy.
Mm-hmm. This is really the long-termist kind of thinking. I really like that, because then you're also thinking what you want to leave behind you, and all these different things. Like, what do you care about even if we are not here? That's one of the more important questions, I think. How old are you right now? Like by calendar, and how old are you by your biological age?
Yeah, chronologically, I'm 46.
Mm-hmm.
Biologically, I'm a few, maybe 100 different ages.
Right. If we pick like the most prominent age that is out there right now, what do you think is the cutting edge age measurement?
Yeah, my brain is 34. My heart is 37. My left ear is 64. My cardiovascular ability is in the top 1.5% of 18-year-olds. My bone mineral density is in the top 0.01% of 30-year-olds, which is age min for that test. Yeah, it's it's we found all kinds of surprises. Some parts of me are older than chronological age, and some parts are younger. Some we've actually slowed. We've slowed my speed of aging pretty dramatically. So I now age slower than 86% of the average 18-year-old.
Wow. Okay, do you think we are going to those Jose Cordero here? He wrote the Death of Death. It's a beautiful book, and it's about immortality, about the ethics of it and stuff like that. Do you think we are going to reach immortality during maybe our lifetimes to reach the longevity escape velocity, where we are, slowing down aging more faster than we are actually aging?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the probabilities. So I guess in answering this question, I could run my mouth and say something totally meaningless. So I'd rather try to focus on something quantitative. And if we try to answer the question quantitative, then we can say one proxy for being able to predict whether or not we will make progress at the speed to solve aging is what intelligence do we bring to bear? Now, up until this point, Homo sapiens have been the primary form of intelligence, and we've had tools to augment our intelligence. So computers have augmented our ability to do things. And now we have, excuse me, a partner in artificial intelligence that is not just a tool, but it's a partner and or something we can't quite explain that is substantially altering our intelligence. And so if you say, what could it do? Take some of the hardest problems that it solved. For example, AlphaFold. If I remember this correctly, there's something like 10 to the 132 power number of combinations that amino acids fold up into a protein. A problem that most people thought was computationally unsolvable because there's more possibilities than there are atoms in the universe, and AlphaFold solved it in a lick. Mm-hmm. And that's remarkable. And so if you take our new partner in artificial intelligence and how fast it can solve seemingly impossibly hard problems, it defies our imagination. So in this moment, when we pose the question, do we think we might be able to radically extend lifespan? No one knows. The probabilities point to an increase in intelligence we're bringing to bear on scales that break our imaginations, that basically strip us of the ability to make any actual predictions other than it's beyond our ability to model out.
Right. You've mentioned several times a kind of a path towards expanding of consciousness, right? So we talk about space travel, but what about travel into our own minds? And mainly, like the most important thing for me is the subjective experience, is consciousness, is the point of view that we have. And how radically can it change during, for example, psychedelic experience? But there are many other experiences. There are meditative experiences, So what is it that moves you towards this frontier of exploring consciousness?
Yeah. If we go back, let's say, 200 years in time, and we pose the question, how big is our reality? And then you started pushing on both edges, going really small and really big. It's orders of magnitude bigger than we ever thought. If you go down to the nanoscale and beyond, if you go out to the edges of the universe, if you look at the spectra of radio frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies, if you look at reality, it is unimaginably bigger than we ever thought 200 years ago.
Right.
And we still don't know if this is the edge or if there's more. And I think the same question could be posed to consciousness. What is the actual occupiable space of consciousness? And we may be the equivalent of 200 years ago. We have a fraction of whatever that space is. And this is why I constantly come back to inviting myself to remember that I may be Homo erectus in this moment. I may literally be a caveman, and my opinions may mean nothing. In fact, it's probably the highest probability of likelihood that sitting on the doorstep of superintelligence and knowing how my own intelligence compares to that, to me, it's a reasonable starting point for my own intelligence of how can I think about the future.
You talked about this kind of thought experiment yesterday as well, where you can actually look at Homo erectus and ask him, how do you hunt, right, for food? Like, where do you find eatable things? And you said, okay, we will trust him to eat the things around, to hunt for whatever. But then you ask him, what do you think about future? What should, like, how does it going to look and stuff like that? And it's, oh, well, it's probably hard to trust that guy, right? So I really love that thought experiment because you can actually extrapolate the ideas from there, and then you're asking from the 25th century, right? And it's like, are they trusting us? And you know, maybe they would a tiny bit in something because they have some technologies, they have something already, but they wouldn't probably trust us like we wouldn't trust the Homo erectus. So I love that thought experiment. I would like to go into some arguments because I felt there's a lot of weird, like, why do we want to live longer? Is it going to be meaningful? And all these things. So tell me about that and the don't die game.
Yeah. I've learned over the course of my life to not trust what my mind says. I learned that when I was chronically depressed and it told me life was hopeless and that I should kill myself repeatedly. I learned that when I learned behavioral economics of the 188 substantiated cognitive biases I have that distort my reality. I learned that in my discovery of how institutions manage reality and how they're not trustworthy. And I learned that in trusting other people in my life who I perceive to be wise and have authority. And I ended up not being able to trust that either. And that includes my own mind. And we, as a species, we've done a pretty good job of establishing baselines of science. That said, sometimes the best answer is no answer. And the thing I would draw attention to is we, Homo sapiens, have become stewards of knowledge. We learn and we collectively maintain this knowledge base. All of us do. We go to school, we understand similar concepts, and AI is going to become the steward of knowledge. We're not going to be the steward of knowledge anymore. So we are transitioning from knowing to a species of not knowing, that we aren't the ones on record of knowing things. And that is such a fundamental shift to our being, because when you pose this question to me, it assumes I know. It assumes that we are knowing. It assumes we have this position, and that's just not the case anymore. And so almost any question we pose about the future, it's probably an invitation for us to reflect. Are we triggering our former inclinations of knowing, or are we going to lean into the future of not knowing, which is really our destination? Now that's scary for people because we don't like a not knowing space. It makes a lot of us panic. And that's going to be our new norm, is a not knowing.
Would you say that, like, are you 100% sure of that? Or what's the percentage of how sure you are with that? Because there's so many like different questions towards that. We don't have that much. It could be conversation for hours just about this, right? Yeah. Because like the mind works inherently differently than an AI right now. There's a process called relevance realization, which is like magically, it's one of the most important processes that gives us the ability to be wise and all these things, to realize the biases, the cognitive biases, right? To look at the glasses that we look through and maybe clean them a little bit, not to bullshit ourselves that much. So what percentage do you think we are getting to not knowing and just delegating all these, like most of the things, right? I think that it is wise to some extent, but then also there is a risk. We don't want to lose the lineage of the knowledge, to lose the anchor. I think that's important for us as well. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I'm not sure about you. My personal practices, for example, I no longer remember phone numbers. I don't remember street names. I've assigned those tasks to my phone and my computer. Now, growing up, I memorized every phone number. I memorized every street. I committed those things to memory because that's the way I functioned in life. So I've shifted a substantial portion of my cognition to my computational tools. I just no longer pay attention to it. And so sometimes yeah, I'm shocked at how much I've shifted. And now, are we all at a deficit because we don't know each other's phone numbers? If the power goes off, we might be in trouble. So there's certainly a trade-off. But I think we all naturally do this is we apply our brains to do different things as our tools evolve. And yeah, this is really, I mean, of all the things that the species has gone through, this is perhaps the most significant revolution in our history, in our 200,000 year history, because what is more fundamental to our existence than our own consciousness being its own deity and deciding reality in every moment?
I love that. This is one of my favorite topics. How do you consciously control the contents of your mind? Have you trained that? Does it come naturally to you? Do you do that?
Yeah, I have an inner dialogue with myself. I learned this when I was depressed. So my brain would say, Bryan, life is really terrible. We don't feel any hope, and it might be sensible to kill ourselves. Like that might be a good outcome. And in that moment, I had to observe who's speaking, where is this coming from? And then I learned that I am not my thoughts, that my brain is generating these things, and I can observe my mind and not be my mind. And that's how I view myself now. In any given moment, even in this conversation, when you raise questions, I'll have 3 or 4 answers come to mind immediately. And I kind of just push them all aside and say, nice try, nice try, nice try, maybe. Because the mind is, if you really spend time in meditation and watch your mind work, it's a pretty humorous process in how it's trying to figure out reality and the error rate. And if you're not consciously aware of that, you will be the error rate unknowingly. And so I like Claude Shannon. Claude Shannon created information theory, the infrastructure of the internet, the mathematics behind it. I like that in how to think and how to speak, that in every moment, you're trying to collapse reality into the simplest, truest form possible. You're trying to avoid playing in any peripheral, any ephemeral, any culturally hip. You're trying to just pierce reality with the most cogent insight possible. And that is the constant game I try to play.
Yeah, I've noticed that whenever there was some interview with you, even now, you kind of pause and it feels there's some process going on. And so many things I have to also pause and just like push them away. So many directions I would love to go to, but I'm very interested in always like I had this red pill about 7 years ago. I'm not doing this alone. I have a co-founder and co-host as well, and so he's my best friend. And we found out that both of us perceive reality differently 7 years ago, right? And it's like, oh, you kind of like know that, but you don't really know that. But if you dive deep, then it's like, oh, you have fundamentally different perception of reality, and that changes you. And I'm taking this with me at all times, and I have this humility afterwards, the epistemic humility, the experiential humility. I just don't know what you are experiencing, and you don't know what I'm experiencing in the realist like sense. But I'm interested to be able to peek into your mind a little bit more. So do you see things? Do you have, I don't know, geometrical patterns? Like Jordan Hall just told me, he was here a week ago, we talked, and he said, oh, I have synesthesia of like senses and they come into geometric patterns from like 9 years old. I'm like, okay, that's like, wouldn't have guessed it ever. So how does your mind work? Do you see stuff? Do you feel stuff?
Yeah, I'm primarily a model builder. That's why I gravitate towards biographies and mathematical models and anything that can quantitatively structure information. Stories are compelling and they do drive action. They aren't the best way to derive accuracy. They create emotional arousal and emotion. So I'm always on the search for model making.
How do these model looks? Is it a bunch of numbers? Is it a model of reality?
I mean, for example, in Blueprint, I can model out and I can say, I can take my behaviors and say, I'm currently going about a health protocol. I'm currently going about a health protocol, and this is how different it is from today's norms. So I can say I'm one standard deviation out or two standard deviations out. If you take one standard deviation out from what is normal today, you get a predictable response from humanity. If you go out two standard deviations, you get a predictable response from humanity. But none of it's novel, and none of it means anything to me personally. And that's why I have such a loving relationship with the hate, is it's an algorithm. You do something two standard deviations from the norm, you get the predictable response. Now, most people don't realize they're the algorithm. They aren't acting in a thoughtful way. It's this repulsive reaction their brain is making, and they're unaware of their own responses. Now, some people are thoughtful, and they'll say, I see this deviates from norms. I know the model throughout history is when humans have deviated from norms, sometimes that deviation ended up being the future, and it was the new norm. And so some people pay attention to that, but others don't. So for me, it's really comical when I see these reactions, because it's mostly stemming from a place of unawareness. They don't realize the models of history. They don't realize their own models of behavior. And then it's a big fun game.
Wow, that brings a lot of like even more clarity to what you do, and how can you, oh, this is part of the game. Like this is part of the model that I've built, and it is an awesome way to be able to stay true to yourself without being necessarily, I know you guys are going to do that.
Yes.
That's amazing. Well, I love that. Oh my God. I really like it. You take a lot of pills. You take care about your nutrition. What would be the most impactful levers that you've pulled?
Yeah. The unique thing we did at Blueprint is we went through all the scientific literature and we ranked them according to power laws. And then we put all those power laws into me, and we measured me more than any human in history. And we wanted to see, where is the science in 2024 for doing this? And so I think a lot of people, like what I typically see in conversations is the power laws are the things everyone knows. Don't smoke, eat a Blueprint-like diet, exercise daily, be a BMI 18.5 to 22.5, and don't drink a lot of alcohol, if any. And then sleep, make that your top priority. Now, those are the basics. Those are the power laws for longevity. Oftentimes, however, those things aren't sexy. People want to be doing whatever their therapy is. Okay. They like talking about it. They like doing it. They like telling other people that they're doing it. And meanwhile, it's hard. They don't master the basics because it's hard. It's really hard to go to bed on time. It's really hard to not overeat. It's really hard to not eat bad food. It's really hard to not have other vices. Really hard. And that's why I think a lot of people shy away from doing the really hard things, because they can't. They feel like they can't. But actually they can. Like, we all can. And this is what I'm trying to do, is to create a safe place for people to feel empowered to do this. That when in their mind, when they're thinking, my friends are going to ridicule me for not drinking or not staying out past my bedtime, they're going to make fun of me for going home when they're going to stay out till 3 a.m, that hopefully I can be on their shoulder and they can say, Bryan Johnson would support me in doing this. And so oftentimes I think we all have these experiences where if we just have one person in our life that we can reference in our mind that, you know what, they're doing it and I can too. That's what I've tried to be, is the one example for the person to say, I can too.
That's beautiful. There's often so many self-limiting beliefs that we have. And then suddenly when someone does something new, like a new record or something, suddenly few more people are, doing it, because we are just like, oh, no, it's not possible in our minds. Yeah. And then, wait, someone did that. So immediately it's this huge shift from like 0 to 100. It's not like by 5%. It's from 0 to 100. It's literally was like impossible to possible. and that feels what you do now.
Exactly.
Like that's like, and that is the shifting of the zeitgeist, right? Because then no one has to, like, people don't have to follow that.
Yeah.
But necessarily new people are being born, and just by statistics, just statistically speaking, there are people that are going to reach that.
Yes.
So you just exist, and that's enough for for us.
Yeah. You think about how funny it is. When we look back at the previous centuries, we see what they did and we laugh. We think, oh, they're so foolish and they were so naive. And then we at the same time observe how amazing we are. We don't contemplate that we may be just as ridiculous as them. And so if you look back at this, let's just imagine we're looking back at the story. We say, okay, interesting. In the early 21st century, this guy, Bryan Johnson, came up with this crazy idea. He said he wasn't going to die. And to do that, he basically tried to measure every way he died in his body, and he tried to minimize death as much as possible. When he did this, everyone in the world made fun of him. They said he was crazy and stupid and ridiculous and vain and an elf and Dracula or a vampire. And he got dunked on by the whole world. And they were celebrating and trying to control their vices. They had vices they didn't have control over. They were trying to protect themselves. Meanwhile, it was very clear for those paying attention that there was actually a revolution at foot, that you could dramatically reduce the speed of aging. It's such a simple story, right? It's like what we hear for centuries and we just laugh. We're playing that out right now and we're invisible to it. But it's so easy to see.
Bryan, I want to respect your time. One last thing, the game of don't die. Like I find now I've been here in Ratan, in Vitalia City, longevity conference and stuff like that for a month now. And we talk about a lot about the ethics or just the mindset about immortality and dying. But like, if you ask anyone right now, if they're having meaningful life and have pleasurable experience, they don't want to be sick and they don't want to die. So are those like, for me, that makes sense then, right? Like, so what is don't die? What is it? What kind of game is it, and who plays that game?
Yeah, there's two edges to this contemplation. One is, if you pose a question right now in 2024 to a Homo sapien, they have an answer. The reality is, what we should adopt is we don't know anything about the future. We don't. And when you pair that with, if we don't know how to answer those questions, is there anything we do know? Anything. Don't die is the only thing we know.
Yeah, life plays that game. Life itself. Bryan, I have so many different thoughts. I hope we are going to be able to speak again, maybe online, maybe in the future when we meet again. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for your time. You're a huge inspiration. Good luck with shifting the zeitgeist. Good luck with not dying. And yeah, it was really a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you. Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And thanks for everyone. We'll hear each other in next episode. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.